Hi, um, we've got our webinar today on how to maximize efficiency with your compliance management systems. And it's for providers who want more from the tools that they already use. So the main problem is that on a lot of NDIS softwares we see that most providers are only using 50% or less of the features that are actually offered. They're entering data across multiple different platforms 3 to 5 times, and there's days lost when they're trying to find information for audit and get ready. So the workflows aren't configured, alerts are off, and everything is over multiple different systems, which is obviously going to cause a problem when you're trying to find something quickly. So what is double handling of data? So imagine that you've received an incident. Received an incident. First, there's the paper form that's filled in on the shift. Then it's typed manually into a compliance system. Then it's copied over to an Excel tracker. And then it's manually emailed to the manager to make sure that they've got that information. And then it's re-entered into a different portal yet again. It's the same incident, 5 different types of data entry. It's got 4 different people, so there's no single source of truth. The versions may mismatch between systems when they notice a mistake in one of the spelling or anything like that. Evidence is fragmented across the different locations when the auditor asks for it. There's no one person who's accountable for the record, so no person owns the errors and you can't figure out what the issue is. And incident patterns can be impossible to identify if the data is not in the one place. You know, if your Excel has only the person's name and no details about the incident, then you maybe are not able to identify trends, but nobody's going to be going through 50 paper copies. You'll kind of want it in a register view that you can use. So that is one of the issues. So then incidents, 3 systems, 1 event. So really focusing on this example, we've got a compliance system where evidence is logged, follow-up status is unknown, and it doesn't have any evidence attached in this compliance system. Then we've got an Excel tracker. So it's updated 2 weeks later. There's different details on the system. Then we've got an email chain. The manager follows up. Investigation is noted, but workers' statements on there, and none of it's linked to the original record. Then we've got another portal, which is the reportable event is re-entered from scratch, and it's the 3rd time that it's been uploaded. Maybe it's the NDIS Commission portal, maybe it's somewhere else that you need to report it. Then complaints. So where does that evidence live? So what actually happens a lot of the time is a complaint is logged into a system and the status is marked as closed. A response letter is then saved to an external share drive such as OneDrive or Google Drive. The family acknowledgement of the complaint is sitting in the coordinator's inbox. The manager they share it via email, and then they get a response, but they haven't saved it. The investigation notes are then put onto a Word doc on somebody's desktop, and then the commission status, if they need to be notified of the complaint, it's unknown because the data is just everywhere. So if that's the system that you're currently working with, what happens on audit day? So in reality, the system shows that a complaint is closed, but there's no documentation to show that. The share drive has 3 different versions of a response letter, not labeled correctly. The email chain isn't found, or it can't be exported. Someone's left, their email box was deleted. The Word document who had the staff member was writing the investigation on, they've since left, and so they are not able to find the investigation. And then the auditor asks for more evidence, but the provider can't produce it. We see this time and time again in our internal audits. We ask people what their process is, and they can tell me perfectly what they think is happening. And then when I ask to see any evidence of it, it's a scramble. It's, can you look here for our complaint form, but look over here for the register, but look over here for something else. And it just doesn't work. They can't find it. There's always something missing. 8 common inefficiency zones where providers are losing time, creating unnecessary audit risk, and doing more work than they should. So, our biggest one is incident management. A lot of the time, people will be using a system like an NDIS software of some sort, and they'll tell me that the incident system just doesn't work. The form isn't long enough. It doesn't let them record whether or not it's reportable or not reportable. It doesn't let them categorize it. It doesn't have a spot for investigations. It's missing some key area that they need to be compliant. But they still continue to use it because that's what the staff are used to. So then what the admin team does is they will download that incident report. They'll save it into a different copy. They'll transfer all the data over, they'll save it somewhere else, and then they'll start working on it there. But obviously, that just creates double handling. It makes it so they might miss one. Any information that they need to find quickly, not easy to be found. And also, if they only give the auditor access to the system that doesn't have a good enough incident form, we're only seeing that. And so we're judging it based on this poor quality document we've seen. So not only do you need to make sure that you're maximizing your efficiency by consolidating all steps as part of one process into the one system and maximizing that efficiency, you also need to make sure that it actually works for your organization before you implement it in full. So if you're using a software and it's got a system that you don't think the incident's great, don't use it. Look at other ways. Obviously, part of this webinar is trying to find a system that can, to maximize efficiency, is to try and use all the one area of your software rather than duplicating work other places. But it also requires you to make sure that they actually do the things you need them to do. And if they're not, find something else that does. The cost of change, I know, can be big, but sometimes the cost of change upfront is better than the hours you're going to lose trying to duplicate data, double handling, and manage this inherent issue. So the same goes for complaints. Having a complaint software is great, but you can't always submit a complaint through that system unless you're a member of it. So therefore, you've got a complaint form, a web form somewhere else. You've got a lot of different places. So that is obviously a big inefficiency zone. Document and policy control as well. Saving different copies of the same document, and we'll get into those. Saving poor version control, having it saved in a SharePoint for one person, Google Drive somewhere else, and it just is getting lost. Staff records and credentials are also really common to be out of date. You make a OneDrive folder for the staff at the start, and then you move to a HR management system, but you don't update it. You give the auditor that OneDrive and everything's out of date. Same for participant record management. It happens all the time. Reporting and governance. Your compliance systems and compliance needs to cover off on governance. A lot of the time those softwares won't. So there will be a lot of double handling trying to piece together the bits of evidence you have using that software. And then workload distribution, not sharing this equally, and the software's configuration, not really understanding how a software works and just going with the defaults, and it's actually causing issues. So zone 1 to 2 of issues is that softwares are being used below capacity. So what most providers do is we'll use a system as a document library only. It's just a place to store information. They won't actually configure any of the automated alerts or reminders because it's either requires a little bit of technical expert or contacting the software provider in the first instance. They'll skip incident escalation workflow setup, so making it so some systems will allow you to escalate them higher up and have that automated process, and not actually working that into their software. Using default permissions and user roles rather than configuring it to what works for you. Some softwares have it, some don't, but you should be investigating that if you're going to be using it. Ignoring vendor update notifications, so not really investigating what is new about a software to see if there's anything that's been changed for you. And running 1 or 2 shared logins, so there's no audit trail. Try to avoid the cost of paying for a user license. We understand, but that does lead to issues of you don't know who's done what. If everyone's signing in on the same account, it is really easy for someone to make a mistake and it not be clear whose fault it is. Someone could delete everything and you'd have no idea who it was. You always need to have everybody has a dedicated login. So what system can do for you? It could so you should look and see whether or not your system can auto-escalate incidents past response deadlines. So remind you that it's overdue. Alert staff when their credentials are expiring. Make sure that complaints are defined and have an investigation workflow, making sure that these have questions there that you can clearly show what your investigation process is for complaints and incidents. Generating governance reports on a schedule, so generating reports for you or being able to generate reports. Assign tasks to specific roles, not just one person, so being able to make sure that you assign a task to, support workers, not just the one person, and maybe produce a live dashboard to show the leadership what's going on. That's the ideal in a lot of softwares, so shop around to find one. So zone 3, staff records across multiple places. So the most common cause of audit failure is the credential gap that nobody knew existed. So this example, we've got working with children expiry dates. It's on a spreadsheet and it's updated manually. So you haven't checked, you haven't seen it. We've got worker screening check status. It's an email from the commission, so you don't know what those are. They haven't written them anywhere, they're just an email somewhere. Mandatory training completion. Keeping paper attendance sheets that aren't then transitioned over to your one source of truth. Professional registration expiry. So leaving it to the individual to just make sure that all of their things are up to date, including insurances for contractors. HR records, using a separate HR platform that isn't being utilized to make sure that you've got all of the things you need. And then onboarding checklist, just having a paper form that you keep in a filing cabinet and never move across. And the fix for that, is one credential register with automated alerts and accessible without asking anybody. So making sure all of these credentials are kept in one register is ideal, or one source of truth. Another place that we see a lot of issues is static documents that have version numbers in the file name. Policy version 3, final, updated 2024. There's 5 versions. Staff are using the wrong one because it's not clear that whether or not they use final number 2 or final number 3 or final. Not utilizing a archive folder either. No review cycle in the system, so the practice standards change, but nobody checks, and the old policy just stays the same. Not checking unless it's audit time. New staff getting a document pack, so they just send a PDF on day 1, but nobody's checking whether or not that's up to date, and there's no record that they've even read it. No acknowledgement tracking. So an auditor will want to see how you're making sure that people have actually understood the information that you're giving them. If you don't follow up with them to get an acknowledgement that they've read it and understood it, nobody's going to know. The other big issue is workloads being concentrated into 1 or 2 people. So when this happens, someone's going to go and leave. People take leave. That's just the nature of life. Compliance is going to stop. If only one person can enter, update, and report on incidents, then if they're gone for the day, they call in sick, what's going to happen? No incidents are getting reported on. Everyone logging into one shared account, there's going to be no individual audit trail. So then also new managers being trained by the one person who set up the system. That just is another task on top of this very busy person's life. Action items from governance meetings being sent by email or not assigned in the system. So if you have the ability to add tasks into your software or whatever system you're using, make sure you utilize that. Try and send it in there, having it in the one place so you can see an audit trail in there. User roles and permissions that have never been reviewed since implementation. So making sure that you're actually reviewing your softwares, not just taking their word that it's the best option and not looking at it again. And frontline staff having no system access and no compliance responsibility. It happens a lot. People don't want to give their staff any access to it, so they're on a need to know, which is obviously you want them to be on a need to know, but they do need to have some compliance responsibility. It is their responsibility to make sure that they also notify you when their license is coming up for review. They also need to be able to be accountable for those things. And then if the person who the system is relying on leaves, the organization is pretty much back to square one. The whole system will crumble if that one person who is the pillar of it leaves. So then we've also got reactive instead of proactive compliance. So most providers really will operate on the panic cycle. The system you're using can help prevent that. I know that there's a lot to do as an NDIS provider, very busy people, but it doesn't mean that you should always be living just waiting for the next disaster to happen and putting out fires. You need to be able to proactively manage these issues. So reactive cycle would be, just auditing once a notice arrives, scrambling to find evidence, discovering those gaps and inconsistencies, manually reporting them and assemble that, corrective actions issued, and then just return to normal. Put a band-aid on them and hope for the best. We have some people who, will say, I've got an internal audit that I need to do. My commission audit is next week. That's not going to help you. It takes time to do an internal audit. It takes time to fix it. It's a bit late. That's a very reactive cycle. Whereas a proactive cycle, making sure you get alerts before the deadline, making sure that you can check the system regularly, monthly pattern reporting, so that way you can absolutely see what is happening, governance reporting, and actions being tracked in the system, and that audit evidence is collected, not discovered. The other issue is that when systems don't talk to each other, so maybe you use a lot of different softwares, rostering system, compliance software, HR platform, finance systems, another portal, and an email to shared drive. There's a lot of data siloing, manual importing and exporting, re-entry at every boundary, and no single source of truth. So each gap between systems is a manual workaround or a duplication risk or a data integrity problem. So there's nothing in the Commission's standards that say that everything needs to be in a one magnificent system, because at the moment, one amazing system doesn't actually exist for NDIS providers. But if you're doing parts of the data in one system and parts of them in another, so, if you're having half of an incident report in one system and half of it in another, and you're relying on the evidence between all of those different softwares, it is a problem. You should be having one area in that one software and trying to get them to talk to each other if they can, and if not, making sure that there is a very good system in place to keep them. So a process for that manual data entry where necessary. But of course, always aim for automated. What to fix first? So obviously you can't do everything at first and at once. So consolidate your incidents and complaints into a single system entry point. No doing it on paper and then putting it into Word and then putting it as a PDF onto a system and then making an Excel version of that. Try and find something that does it all in one go. Then configure your automated reminders, credential expiry, complaint response deadlines, policy review dates, etc. Set up individual user logins. Every action needs an audit trail linked to name a person. Review your system dashboards and reporting features. Book in a time with your vendor if you need. Make sure you're getting what you need out of your software. It should be working for you. And distribute compliance responsibilities. So more than one person needs to know how things work. So make sure you always are distributing those. Your system should be working harder than you are. So we've got a compliance system, which I'll show you in a second. And this system goes over all of your compliance obligations. So let me just get that up for you. Check that that's showing correctly. So this is our compliance software. So this has, for example, complaints, compliments, and feedback. So you can see here that you can put in your complaint, compliment, feedback, or grievance, pop in a date, who submitted it, the category of that complaint, any details about the complaint, and then who received the complaint, how it was given, has an acknowledgement letter been sent, is there a proposed resolution date, what's the status of this investigation for it, the investigation results, the date that the complaint was resolved, the date they were notified, and any follow-up actions and process feedback. So this complaint form here is guiding you through the complaint process. It's not half a form here, half a form here, and half a form there. And this one can be submitted by anybody. So they don't need to have a login to the system, so then you can make sure all your complaints going straight in as opposed to having half and half on a different platform. So that is part of our compliance system. It's also got all the other things that our Excel compliance management system has, which I'll show in a second. And it's got automated reminders, so email reminders when things are due to be reviewed. You can go in and look at everything that is due. So if I, for example, just want to look at March, I can do that. And sorry, May. And look at that. I don't have anything to do, but maybe I did in April. Is there anything overdue? Yes, I've got a couple things that are overdue, so I need to go in and action those. So I can do that straight from here as opposed to hoping for the best and finding them. So, and we'll send some information about our compliance system there. But the point is that this is designed to, you want a system that's going to put all of your things into one place and make sure it's working for you. There's so many times that we talk to providers who are using an incident management system online, but it turns out it doesn't actually do the final step for them. So then they're downloading it manually, sorting through the data, putting it somewhere else, or it doesn't let them export it. So investigate your systems, make sure that they're actually doing what you need them to do. And if they're not, consider whether or not it'd be worth changing to something that does work for you. There are some providers who swear by one software and another provider will tell you it's the worst thing they've ever used. Things are different. Everybody has different preferences and different needs. So no one solution is going to be best for every single person. So make sure you look around for those. So our Excel compliance management system. So this system is all about compliance and governance. So this is meant to cover on those gaps that some of those softwares may not have. So if you are struggling to find, you do have that one system you love, and there are a couple compliance related issues that you just can't figure out in that software, and you don't want a new software, but you're a small enough provider that an Excel works, then this is probably the solution for you. So this has all of the compliance related obligations, corporate risk registers, emergency and disaster drills, asset list, conflict of interest register, everything you could possibly need for your compliance is all in there. Well, I'll keep that short and sweet. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a lovely, lovely day.